Pajeta Conservancy, early morning. Two lion cubs lay quietly beneath a thorn tree, their small, fragile bodies pressed close to the earth. They were clearly alone. Ranger Daniel spotted them from a distance and felt a slow tightening in his chest. There was no sign of their mother nearby. The cubs' wide eyes flickered with a mixture of confusion and fear as they scanned the bush that surrounded them. Their tawny fur was matted and dusty. Their ribs, showing faintly beneath thin skin, stretched tight from hunger. The silence around them was profound, except for the occasional soft whimper or rustle of dry leaves in the gentle breeze. It was a silence weighted with vulnerability, one that spoke of abandonment. Daniel knew how rare it was for lion cubs to be left alone for long, especially at this young age. Lionesses usually left their young only briefly to hunt or move them, but never this far or this long. In the unforgiving wilds of Pajeta, where dangers lurked in every shadow, such abandonment was a serious threat to the cubs' survival. Daniel approached slowly, his movements deliberate and careful. He wanted to get close enough to observe without causing unnecessary alarm. One cub stirred weakly, lifting its head with a faint whimper, its large eyes filled with uncertainty and exhaustion. The other remained still, eyes half closed, breathing shallow and uneven. They were too young to defend themselves or find food. The thorn tree beneath which they huddled provided little protection from the hot sun that was steadily climbing higher in the sky. The dry earth cracked slightly underfoot, dust rising in small clouds with every step Daniel took. The surrounding bushes swayed gently, but no sound suggested the mother's return. No tracks nearby showed recent movement or care. The cubs were truly alone. Daniel's face remained calm, but inside, concern deepened. Every minute they stayed without their mother increased their risk. Predators might be watching. The heat could sap their strength. Hunger gnawed unseen beneath their fur. He kneeled a short distance away and observed the smaller cub shift awkwardly, its movements slow and weak. The morning air smelled of dry grass and earth warmed by the sun. A faint breeze carried the distant calls of birds and the chatter of waking insects. Yet beneath these sounds, the cub's quiet vulnerability seemed painfully out of place. Daniel scanned the area once more. If the mother was nearby, she was well hidden or unable to return. Time was slipping away, and with every passing moment, the cub's situation became more precarious. Daniel whispered softly, "It's okay, little ones." His voice a quiet comfort, neither rushed nor demanding. It was a phrase meant to soothe the tension in the air, to offer something steady amidst uncertainty. He stayed still, watching as one cub blinked slowly, eyes searching the horizon with a fragile hope that seemed almost too faint to hold on to. The other emitted a soft, tired whine. Their small movements were tentative, weighed down by exhaustion and hunger. They did not cry loudly for fear of attracting unwanted attention from predators, but their distress was clear in every subtle gesture, the trembling paws, the flicking ears, and the slight shivering of their bodies. Daniel knew they could not last long alone. The bush around them was both home and hazard, a place where safety depended entirely on the presence of the mother or protective pride. Daniel's mind worked quickly but quietly. The survival of the cubs depended on the mother's return or human intervention if necessary. But intervention was never simple. The wild demanded respect and caution, especially with young lions. Any approach had to be gentle and deliberate, preserving trust while ensuring safety. He remained a calm presence, knowing that sudden movement or loud noise could cause the cubs to bolt into danger or push a mother away if she returned. The delicate balance of the moment was held together by patience and watchfulness. He took note of the smaller cub's limp, barely noticeable but real. It shifted its weight unevenly, favoring one paw as it tried to stand. This injury compounded the risk. An injured cub would struggle even more to keep up with the pride or evade threats. Daniel's experience told him that even minor wounds could become fatal without care. The bush, dry and harsh, offered no medicine except time and protection, something the cubs did not have. He knew the day ahead would test their limits. Hours passed slowly, the sun climbing relentlessly. The cubs barely moved, conserving what little energy they had. Their breathing grew shallow, their eyes occasionally fluttering closed as exhaustion crept over them. Daniel watched quietly, his presence a steady anchor in an uncertain world. The landscape around them was beautiful but indifferent. Dry grasses swayed in the breeze, acacia trees stood tall and still, and distant hills rose like silent guardians. Yet here, beneath the thorn tree, life hung by a thread. Daniel scanned again for any signs of the mother or the pride. Nothing moved beyond the occasional flutter of birds or rustle of small mammals in the underbrush. The cub's isolation was complete. He realized that if the mother did not return soon, the cub's chances would fall sharply. He silently weighed the options. Waiting risked losing them to hunger, dehydration, or predators. Intervening risked breaking the fragile trust between humans and wild lions, possibly endangering the cubs further if not done correctly. He chose patience, hope, and quiet vigilance. At one point, the smaller cub let out a soft, trembling moan, a fragile sound barely rising above the whisper of the wind. Daniel felt the weight of that sound deep inside. It was a reminder that these were living creatures, not just animals in a story. Their survival depended on choices made by both nature and humans, on moments like this when stillness and action were entwined. "You're almost there," he whispered, voice low and gentle, not expecting a response but offering comfort. The afternoon light grew warmer, casting long shadows from the thorn tree. The cubs stirred faintly, huddling closer together as if drawing strength from one another. Their small bodies trembled, but their eyes still held a glimmer of life. Daniel remained near but distant enough not to frighten them. He understood the fragile balance. Too close and the cubs might panic. Too far and danger could approach unseen. As the day wore on, Daniel noticed a slight change in the cubs' posture. They seemed to gather a small reserve of strength, shifting from exhaustion toward a tentative awareness of their surroundings. The bush around them remained quiet but watchful. Daniel's mind stayed sharp, knowing that the coming hours could mean rescue or loss. In the wild, there were no guarantees. But in this quiet morning, beneath the thorn tree at Olpeheta, 2 lion cubs waited with uncertain hope, their lives poised between the harshness of abandonment and the possibility of survival. Daniel's steady presence was a small beacon of care in the vast wilderness, a reminder that even in moments of fragility, there was someone watching, someone who might help. The day would tell what came next. The morning stretched on with slow, measured quiet as the 2 lion cubs remained huddled beneath the thorn tree. Daniel moved cautiously closer, each step deliberate and careful, mindful of the fragile state before him. The smaller cub trembled slightly, its soft whimpers barely rising above the dry rustling of leaves. Daniel's trained eyes scanned the little creature's slender frame, noting how thin the cubs had become, ribs pressing just beneath the fur, muscles weakened by hunger and thirst. The sun climbed higher, warming the earth, yet the cubs showed no strength to seek shade or water. Instead, they remained still, their breaths shallow and uneven. A sudden, subtle shift caught Daniel's attention. The smaller cub tried to stand, but its front paw faltered. There was a faint, uneven limp. Its weight wavered as it pressed down unevenly. The injured paw held slightly off the ground with clear discomfort. The sight tightened Daniel's chest. An injury to such a young cub was dangerous. Without immediate care, infection could set in, or the cub could be unable to keep pace with the pride. If it fell behind, survival chances would quickly plummet. The dry bush around them held hidden threats. Hyenas prowled and leopards might be nearby. Predators sensed weakness easily. Daniel knelt slowly, maintaining a calm, non-threatening presence. The cub's eyes tracked him with hesitant wariness, their ears flicking nervously as they caught faint sounds in the underbrush. Their bodies trembled, a mix of cold sweat and exhaustion. The dry air was thick with the scent of earth and thorn, but beneath it lay the tension of unseen danger. Nearby, the distant call of a hyena echoed faintly, reminding Daniel of the urgency. The cubs were isolated, vulnerable, and preyed upon in this landscape. The absence of the mother left a void no cub could fill alone. The injured cub let out a soft whine, a small plaintive sound that carried no strength but spoke volumes of distress. Daniel's voice softened as he murmured, "You're almost there." The words, gentle and steady, meant to calm, not command. The other cub shifted closer, nuzzling the injured sibling with tentative comfort. Their small bodies pressed together, seeking warmth and safety in the face of threat. Their whiskers twitched, ears rotating to catch every subtle noise in the bush. The fragile duo showed clear signs of stress. Eyes wide, muscles tense, and breaths coming in shallow bursts. Daniel's thoughts raced as he weighed the risks. The limp meant the cub was less able to flee or defend itself. If a predator appeared, the cubs could not outrun or outfight it. Without their mother's protection, they were exposed and alone. The risk of dehydration and starvation grew with every passing hour. Daniel knew the cub's survival depended on swift but careful intervention, yet he also understood the delicate nature of approaching wild lions. Too sudden a move might cause them to scatter or panic, increasing danger. The bush around them remained quiet, almost holding its breath. The dry grass bent lightly with the breeze, but no relief came from the heat. Daniel adjusted his position, careful not to cast a shadow directly over the cubs. His presence was steady but gentle, a human shape intruding in the wild, yet offering something unfamiliar: attention and care. The cub's breathing remained shallow, the injured paw lifted slightly with each hesitant movement. If they remained in this state much longer, exhaustion would overwhelm them. A low rustle nearby made Daniel's heart beat faster. He froze, watching the underbrush with sharp eyes. A pair of small birds took flight, startled by an unseen movement. The cub's ears twitched in response. Predators were patient, and the bush concealed more than just dry branches. Daniel understood that time was slipping away. If they did not act soon, the cubs might fall victim to the very dangers that stalked this land. Despite the grim risks, Daniel's focus remained calm and measured. He knelt closer still, careful to avoid sudden motions, observing the cub's breathing and small gestures of discomfort. The injured paw was swollen slightly, the skin broken in a shallow scrape that hinted at an earlier struggle. The smaller cub's movements were hesitant, its eyes half closed with fatigue. The other cub shifted again, a quiet encouragement, but neither could offer protection or escape. Their survival was fragile, dependent on human care or the mother's unexpected return. Daniel's voice was soft when he spoke again, barely above a whisper. "It's okay, girl." The words hung gently in the dry air, a small thread of calm for creatures caught between fear and hope. The cubs responded not with sound but with subtle gestures, a flick of an ear, a slow blink, and a quiet nuzzle. The stillness held a fragile tension. Life teetered on a knife's edge, and every heartbeat mattered. As the morning moved toward midday, the threat around the cubs remained invisible but ever present. Daniel understood clearly that the longer they stayed alone, the greater the risk. Predators could sense weakness from afar. The cubs' thin bodies and trembling paws marked them as easy targets. Their small, soft whimpers were calls for protection they could not summon. Without swift intervention, their chances of survival diminished with every breath. The bush was a place of life but also of danger, a stark reminder of nature's unforgiving balance. Daniel made a slow, deliberate decision. He would watch and wait, but also prepare to intervene. The limp was a sign that the cub needed help, and the absence of the mother left no alternative. Yet any action had to be measured, respectful, and gentle to avoid causing panic or stress. The cub's fragile trust had to be preserved. His steady presence was their first hope in hours. The next moments would decide their fate. Daniel settled into a quiet spot some distance from the thorn tree, choosing a vantage point that would let him watch the cubs without disturbing their fragile stillness. The dry earth beneath him was warm from the morning sun, and the air carried the faint scent of dust and wilted grass. The bush held a fragile silence, broken only by distant bird calls and the gentle rustling of leaves stirred by a soft breeze. The cubs remained where they had been found, their small bodies curled close to the ground, breath shallow and uneven. Daniel's eyes stayed fixed on them, careful to keep his movements slow and minimal, knowing that any sudden gesture might startle or frighten the vulnerable pair. The cubs' quiet whimpers were barely audible, but their body language spoke clearly of confusion and exhaustion. One cub's ears twitched, flicking toward a distant sound while the other shifted slightly, pressing closer to its sibling as if seeking strength in numbers. Their fur, a mix of tawny gold and dirt, caught the light in fleeting flashes, their wide eyes blinking slowly as they tried to remain alert despite their obvious fatigue. Daniel watched the injured paw of the smaller cub, noting the faint swell that had grown since he first saw them. The risk to their survival was immediate and real. Weakness in such a hostile environment was dangerous. As the minutes passed, the bush seemed to hold its breath. The normal sounds of life, birdsong, the hum of insects were sparse, creating a tension that Daniel felt deep in his chest. His senses sharpened, eyes scanning the edges of the clearing and the shadows cast by the low morning sun. Then a subtle movement caught his attention just beyond the thicket. Shadows shifted among the trees, barely visible but unmistakable. Something, or someone, was watching the cubs, too. Daniel's heart beat faster, but his expression remained calm. The watchers were silent, their presence hidden but undeniable. He shifted slightly, focusing on the flicker of movement in the bushes. There was no immediate threat visible, yet the sense of eyes upon the cubs was unmistakable. The fragile silence of the clearing was broken not by sound, but by the weight of unseen observation. The bush itself seemed alive with quiet tension, the cubs unaware that they were not alone. The cub's ears flattened briefly at the subtle disturbance, and the smaller one let out a soft whimper before settling back down, exhausted. Daniel stayed still, knowing any noise or sudden movement could drive the watchers away, or worse, provoke a dangerous reaction. His presence was steady and deliberate, a calm guardian in the quiet wilderness. The stakes were clear. If the watchers were predators or rivals, the cubs' safety was at immediate risk. If they were other lions or members of the pride, their arrival could change the fragile balance of this moment. The sunlight filtered through the canopy, casting dappled patterns over the earth and the small figures beneath the thorn tree. Daniel's breath slowed as he continued his watch, eyes never leaving the cubs or the shifting shadows beyond. Time stretched thin, and the weight of uncertainty pressed down. The cubs remained still, their bodies rising and falling in soft rhythms of survival. Their trust in the world around them, however tentative, was the only shield they had. After several tense moments, the shadows began to move away, slipping silently back into the bush. The watchers receded into the wilderness, leaving the cubs alone once more. Daniel exhaled quietly, relief tempered by caution. The threat had passed for now, but the danger remained. The cubs' vulnerability was unchanged, and the need for intervention had become even more urgent. If they stayed exposed too long, predators might return. The fragile lives beneath the thorn tree depended on swift, careful action. Daniel rose slowly, eyes lingering on the cubs as he prepared to move closer and assess their condition. The weight of the silent watchers hung in the air, a reminder that the bush was never truly empty. As he stepped forward, the cubs stirred faintly, their small bodies responding to the shifting presence nearby. The moment was quiet but charged, a delicate dance between trust and survival in the wild. It was clear to Daniel that the cubs were watched over by forces seen and unseen, and that the fragile thread of their survival was entwined with the shadows of the bush itself. The next steps would demand patience and care, for in this place every movement mattered. The sun climbed steadily, casting long, warming rays through the sparse canopy of acacia trees. Daniel remained quietly observant, eyes fixed on the fragile cubs nestled beneath the thorn tree, their small bodies barely moving. Suddenly, a shift in the bush beyond caught his attention. Slow, deliberate steps emerging from the shadows. The figure was large, unmistakably a fully grown lion, but not the mother he had hoped to see. It was an adult male, powerful and wary, stepping cautiously into the clearing. His tawny mane was dusted with dirt and streaked with scars, evidence of past battles and survival in a harsh world. The male moved deliberately, his posture low and tentative as he approached the cubs. His amber eyes flicked rapidly between the vulnerable pair and the surrounding bush, alert to every sound and movement. Daniel watched the scene unfold with measured concern. The presence of the male introduced new complexities. He was both protector and potential threat, his intentions uncertain in this delicate moment. The cubs, sensing the unfamiliar figure, lifted their heads slowly, their wide eyes blinking as they took in his imposing form. The male lion's body language was cautious but not aggressive. He lowered his head, sniffing the air near the cubs, then gently nuzzled the injured one. The smaller cub responded with a tentative nudge, pressing closer despite its weakness. Daniel noted the subtle exchange, an unspoken bond flickering in the quiet space between them. Yet the male's wary gaze never left the perimeter of the clearing, alert for any approaching danger. His muscles remained tense, ready to act if threatened, but for now, his focus was on the cubs. Daniel's heart beat steadily as he considered the new dynamics. The father's arrival was unexpected, but it brought a fragile hope. The cubs were no longer entirely alone. Still, the situation was precarious. The male's protective instincts might help shield the cubs from predators, but his exhaustion and scars told of recent struggles. He was not invincible. Daniel understood that the male's strength and vigilance were critical, but so was the risk. Any sudden movement or external threat could provoke a reaction that endangered everyone. The injured cub shifted, its small body trembling slightly but pressing toward the male as if drawing comfort from his presence. The larger cub remained alert, eyes darting to the edges of the clearing. Daniel's voice broke the quiet, barely above a whisper. "It's okay, girl," he said softly, more for the cub's calm than any expectation of response. The cub's ears flicked toward him, but they remained focused on the male, their small bodies still and attentive. The sun rose higher, and the heat began to press down, yet the male lion stayed close, a silent guardian in the uncertain moment. Daniel's mind raced through the possibilities. If the male could protect and care for the cubs until their mother returned or help arrived, their survival chances improved. But the signs of his weariness were clear. His breath came in slow, deliberate pants, and his movements, though deliberate, showed fatigue. The delicate balance of this reunion was held tightly between hope and risk. Daniel moved slowly, careful not to disturb the fragile scene. He watched as the male lion stretched and settled himself near the cubs, his protective posture softening but alert. The injured cub lifted its head briefly, eyes meeting the male's gaze with quiet trust. The father's presence added a new layer of security but also a new set of challenges. Without the mother, the family unit was incomplete, and the path forward was uncertain. As the day advanced, Daniel understood that the male's arrival changed everything. The cub's survival no longer rested solely on human intervention or the mother's unknown return. Now, the strength and care of their father mattered as well. The bush remained watchful, the threats lurking unseen, but for a moment, the fragile family stood together. Their lives intertwined in the quiet heat of the day, a testament to resilience amid uncertainty. Daniel stayed close but distant enough to allow the family their space, knowing that this moment of connection was both rare and delicate. The future was still unclear, but the cubs' chances had shifted. They were no longer entirely alone. The male lion lowered his heavy head slowly, the weight of weariness evident in every movement. His amber eyes softened as he reached the smaller cub first, pressing his broad muzzle gently against its fur. The injured cub responded with a faint, quiet nuzzle, leaning into the touch with cautious trust. Nearby, the larger cub blinked and shifted closer, its small body pressing tentatively against the male's side. The fragile family formed a delicate circle beneath the shade of the thorn tree, their breath mingling in the still air. Daniel watched with careful attention, sensing a thread of hope weaving through this unexpected reunion. The male's mane was tangled and dusty, flecked with patches of dried blood and scarred from recent fights. His muscles, once powerful and taut, now rippled with exhaustion beneath a thin coat of sweat. Each breath came deliberate and slow, a quiet struggle against fatigue. Yet, despite the weariness, his posture remained protective. His eyes scanned the surrounding bush, sharp and alert, guarding the vulnerable cubs with a vigilance born of hard experience. Daniel understood that this lion carried more than just the weight of his body. He bore the responsibility for these young lives in a harsh, unforgiving world. The cubs responded to his presence with soft, hesitant purrs and gentle nudges, tentative gestures of recognition and need. Their small bodies, frail and trembling, sought the comfort of the father's strength. The injured cub lifted its paw slightly, pressing it against the male's flank, a silent plea for protection. Daniel's gaze rested on the swollen paw, a reminder that time was slipping away and danger still loomed. The cub's survival depended not only on this reunion, but also on finding safety soon, away from the watchful eyes of predators and the relentless heat of the day. The bush around them remained quiet, the usual sounds muted, as if the landscape itself held its breath. A light breeze stirred the dry leaves, carrying the faint scent of earth and thorn, mingling with the subtle musk of the lions. Daniel remained still, careful not to disturb the fragile moment unfolding before him. His presence was a quiet witness to the delicate balance between hope and uncertainty. Every movement, every gesture mattered, shaping the fate of this fragile family. The male lion shifted slightly, nuzzling the larger cub next, his breath warm and steady against the soft fur. The cub responded by pressing closer, their bodies touching in a small, vulnerable cluster. Daniel could see the faint rise and fall of their chests, slow and measured, a fragile rhythm of survival. Yet, beneath this tender reunion lay the harsh reality. The male's battle scars told of violence and struggle, and his exhaustion spoke of a body pushed to its limits. The family's future was uncertain, bound by the fragile threads of endurance and care. Daniel whispered softly, "You're almost there," his voice low and steady, a quiet reassurance carried in the dry air. The cubs flicked their ears in response, eyes half closed with a mixture of trust and fatigue. The male's gaze remained fixed on the horizon, scanning for any sign of threat. In this vulnerable state, the family was exposed, dependent on strength that was waning and on the hope of safety beyond the immediate clearing. As the sun climbed higher, shadows lengthened and shifted, the day pressing on with relentless heat. The cubs nestled closer to their father, seeking shade and protection, their bodies still trembling from exhaustion and injury. Daniel knew the coming hours would test their fragile bond. Without shelter, water, and rest, their chances would diminish rapidly. The risk was clear. If they could not find safety soon, survival would slip beyond reach. Yet in this quiet reunion, Daniel found a slender thread of hope. The male's protective presence, though strained, offered a shield against the dangers of the wild. The cubs' soft purrs and gentle nudges spoke of trust slowly rekindling, a fragile but vital connection. The family's strength lay not only in muscle and might but also in these subtle gestures of care and belonging. The bush held its quiet tension as Daniel prepared to move carefully closer, ready to provide aid if needed, but mindful of the delicate balance. Every decision carried weight. The family's survival hinged on cautious steps and patient care, on the slow rebuilding of trust and strength. In the stillness beneath the thorn tree, the fragile reunion marked a turning point, a moment where hope lingered alongside uncertainty, and every breath was a gift. ChatGPT said, "The heavy growls drifted faintly through the dry branches, carrying a warning that rippled across the quiet clearing." Daniel's eyes sharpened, scanning the edges of the bush where shadows gathered and shifted with restless movement. The scent of vulnerability had traveled far, and rival lions drawn by it prowled nearby. Their presence was unmistakable, deep, guttural calls that echoed through the thinning trees, a low chorus of threat and dominance. The fragile family beneath the thorn tree was no longer safe. Daniel remained still, his breath steady but heart pounding with urgency. He watched as the male lion's ears twitched sharply, muscles tensing beneath his worn mane. The cubs, sensing the tension, stirred uneasily, small bodies trembling but not yet fleeing. Their wide eyes reflected both fear and confusion as they tried to process the growing danger. The injured cub shifted its weight gingerly, the swollen paw pressed close to the ground, a silent reminder of their vulnerability. Time was slipping away, and the stakes had never been higher. The rival lions moved with deliberate caution, their shadows flickering through the underbrush like ghostly predators drawn toward weakness. Daniel understood the delicate balance of power at play. The male lion before him was exhausted, his strength diminished by past battles, and these challengers sought to exploit every sign of weakness. If the family were caught unprepared, the consequences could be fatal. The cubs, too young and frail, would stand no chance against a violent confrontation. Daniel's mind raced through the possibilities. Any abrupt action risked alarming the lions or frightening the cubs into flight. Yet doing nothing could mean disaster. His presence needed to be steady and calm, a quiet guardian who could intervene with care and precision. He shifted his position slowly, keeping low, eyes fixed on the tense figures slipping through the trees. The brush crackled faintly as the rivals drew closer, their low growls resonating beneath the canopy. The male lion responded instinctively, rising with a slow, deliberate grace that belied his exhaustion. He positioned himself protectively between the cubs and the approaching threat, muscles coiled and ready. His amber eyes burned with fierce determination despite the fatigue that weighed on his frame. The cubs pressed tightly against him, their small bodies shaking with a mix of fear and trust. The moment held a fragile tension, the air thick with danger and hope intertwined. Daniel whispered softly, "It's okay, girl," his voice a quiet thread of reassurance in the heavy silence. The cubs' ears flicked toward him, their breathing shallow and rapid. The male's stance remained firm, a sentinel guarding against the encroaching shadows. The rival lions circled at a distance, testing the boundaries, their growls a constant reminder that the family's safety was far from secure. As the tension escalated, Daniel knew that patience and vigilance were essential. The family's survival depended on calm responses and clear signals of strength. Any sign of panic could provoke violence, yet passivity might invite attack. The male lion's protective instincts were the family's strongest shield, but they were stretched thin by exhaustion. Daniel prepared to intervene if necessary, mindful that his actions could tip the balance toward safety or chaos. The bush around them held its breath as the rival lions lingered, their movements slow but deliberate. The scent of fear and vulnerability hung in the air. a silent alarm that echoed through the dry leaves. The cubs remained pressed close, their soft whimpers muted beneath the protective presence of their father. Daniel's watchful gaze never wavered, each heartbeat a measure of hope and peril. The sun shifted, casting long shadows that deepened the clearing's contrast between light and dark. The growls faded gradually as the rival lions retreated, their interest waning in the face of determined defense. The family remained intact, their fragile bond tested but unbroken. Daniel exhaled quietly, relief tempered by the knowledge that this was only one of many threats to come. The struggle for survival in the wild was relentless and unyielding. For now, the cubs were safe beneath the thorn tree, guarded by a weary but resolute father and watched over by a quiet, human presence. The moment was fragile, suspended between danger and reprieve, a testament to endurance amid uncertainty. As the distant calls of the wild settled into uneasy silence, Daniel knew the coming days would demand vigilance and care. The family's fate rested on steady hands and quiet courage. The cub's swelling paw had been carefully tended, the bandage secure but gentle against tender skin. The swelling had begun to recede, and the subtle stiffness in its step softened with each measured movement. The male lion stayed close, a watchful sentinel whose body carried the marks of countless battles, scars that told stories of survival and sacrifice. His eyes, though still wary, softened as he shifted his weight protectively beside the cubs, standing firm against the encroaching twilight. As the sun lowered, casting long amber rays through the acacia leaves, the family gathered at the edge of the bush where dense shadows gave way to open plains. The air cooled with the coming dusk, stirring grasses that whispered softly in the breeze. The cubs, now a little steadier on their feet, leaned against the father's flank, seeking strength and reassurance in his presence. Their breathing slowed, a quiet rhythm mingling with the evening sounds, a distant bird call, the faint rustle of leaves, and the heartbeat of the wild settling into night. Daniel remained a respectful distance away, eyes steady but heavy with the weight of what had passed. He watched the fragile family as they prepared to move forward, a small unit bound by circumstance and resilience. The male lion's posture was cautious but resolute. The scars that marked his mane reminded Daniel that this was a creature who had fought hard for every moment of life. Yet now, in this calm twilight, there was a softness, too, a rare pause amid the relentless rhythms of the wild. The cubs, their bodies still small and vulnerable, tested their steps carefully. One ventured forward hesitantly, its paw still tender but willing. The other followed, eyes bright but cautious, glancing to the male lion for reassurance before moving into the open space beyond the thorn tree. Daniel's gaze lingered on these subtle movements, a quiet witness to the delicate balance between fragility and strength. The risk of injury remained, as did the ever-present dangers of the bush, but for now, hope held sway. As darkness deepened, the family began to step slowly away from the shelter of the trees, moving toward safer ground. Their progress was tentative but steady, a fragile procession guided by instinct and the male's protective watchfulness. Daniel felt the gravity of the moment, the passage from vulnerability to cautious independence, the beginning of a new chapter in this family's story. The cubs' survival was no longer just a question of healing but of enduring the wild's relentless challenges. The fading light wrapped the landscape in soft hues of purple and gold. A gentle wind stirred the tall grass, carrying the scent of earth and thorn, a whisper of the seasons turning. Daniel inhaled deeply, grounding himself in the stillness around him. This moment, fragile and fleeting, would remain etched in his memory. The quiet strength of a family reborn amid hardship, the small victory carved from uncertainty. The male lion paused once more, his head lifted toward the horizon, eyes scanning the gathering dusk. The cubs nestled closer, their small bodies pressed into his side, a silent affirmation of connection and trust. Daniel stepped back slowly, giving space but carrying the scene within him. The bush fell silent again, the distant calls of the wild softening as night fully settled. As the stars began to shimmer overhead, the family disappeared into the shadows beyond the clearing, their forms blending with the darkening earth. Daniel lingered for a moment longer. The soft sound of wind through the grass the only witness to this fragile new beginning. In the quiet, hope endured, not loud or certain, but present, like the steady pulse of life itself. Prompt: early morning in Ol Payeta Conservancy. Beneath a sparse thorn tree, two frail lion cubs huddle close, their dusty fur and visible ribs betraying hunger. One limps slightly, a paw swollen from injury. A weary male lion, scarred from old battles, stands protectively over them, his amber eyes scanning the golden-lit savannah for danger. In the distance, the bush lies still, shadows hinting at unseen predators. The air is warm with the scent of dry grass and acacia, the scene a delicate balance between vulnerability